Alone finally brings us a game-changing duo mode. 14 survivalists are split into teams of two. They could be loving family members or close friends who know each other's inside out. But each team can only bring 10 items of gear. The drop zone is still the bear-infested Vancouver Island, but the rules are far more brutal this time. If one team member taps out, the other is automatically pulled from the show. Only by working together and surviving till the end can they walk away with the massive $500,000 prize. As the chopper fades into the distance, up first is husband and wife, Dave and Brooke. Even though his drop point isn't too bad, Dave's only goal right now is to follow his compass and reunite with his wife ASAP. But hiking 10 miles through a predator-filled, dangerous wilderness is way harder than it sounds. For this challenge, their 10 items include a saw, a ferro rod, an axe, hooks and lines, 2 pots, 2 tarps, and 2 emergency rations. Hailing from Alaska, Dave and Brooke raised their 2 kids off the grid, far from city life, living an outdoor dream. The couple once spent 8 months living on a deserted island. Whether it's hunting, fishing, trapping, or foraging wild edibles, they've mastered every single survival skill. Stepping into this game, they're dead set on taking home that $500 K. Dave follows the creek, gets his bearings towards the deep timber, shoulders his pack, and begins the long, hard trek to survive and find his wife. Meanwhile, his wife Brooke is super pumped. She's taking in the fresh surroundings. After a quick look around, she knows her priority right now is to find a good spot for a makeshift shelter. This way, when her husband finally arrives, he'll have a warm, cozy place to crash. Brooke pushes deep into the woods. Soon enough, she spots a stream, which gets her fired up. Flowing water means she won't have to stress about finding drinking water. Moving up the creek, a bright patch of yellow catches her eye. Taking a closer look, it's a huge patch of chanterelles. Chanterelles are packed with vitamin D, fiber, iron, and copper. A rare wild feast like this, there's no way she's passing it up. Scoring big right out the gate boosts Brooke's drive to win it all. Continuing her scout, she gathers a bunch of twigs off a massive pine tree. This is top-tier fire starter, easy to light and burns strong. But as she heads back to the shore for her gear, she spots a gray wolf nearby, strutting right towards her. They lock eyes. Brooke is too scared to even breathe. The hairs on her neck stand up, heart pounding, as the wolf closes in. Fighting her panic, she mans up and yells at the wolf. Maybe her shouting spooked it, or maybe the wolf decided she wasn't on the menu, or maybe it went to grab the pack. After hesitating a second, the wolf turns and vanishes into the brush. Watching it disappear, Brooke is still pretty shaken up. It was a close call. She knows danger is everywhere out here. That wolf was just a warning. Getting a solid shelter up is dead priority. After calming her nerves, she grabs all her gear and starts hunting for a spot to build her camp. Brothers Brad and Josh are the second team to drop in. Right after landing, Brad straps his bear spray to his belt. Better safe than sorry. He's keeping his head on a swivel, scanning the woods. He knew before coming that this place is crawling with black bears, wolves, and cougars. One slip up, and you could get ambushed. After doing a quick gear check, Brad hauls his heavy 60-pound pack and starts humping it toward his brother. For this challenge, the brothers brought a pot for water, an axe, hooks and lines, a tarp, a pot, emergency rations, 2 sleeping bag liners, and 2 saws. The rugged terrain is already a nightmare to navigate, let alone with 60 pounds on your back. Every step is a real grind for Brad. Back in Illinois, the brothers run a blacksmith shop together. They barely make a living off this trade. The daily hammering of hot iron is the soundtrack of their lives. They're also massive outdoorsmen. In their downtime, they go hiking and practice all sorts of survival skills. Sometimes they spend over a month in the wild, so roughing it out isn't torture to them. It's right in their wheelhouse. Joining this challenge, they mainly want to win the $500 K to expand their blacksmith business and keep the family legacy alive. As they say, brothers united can break gold. Even though the trail is punishing, Brad is still worried sick about his little brother. That brotherhood is the fuel driving him to push through. Over on the other side, Josh, thinking about how he finally made it to the survival stage he dreamed of, can't hide his stoke. But job number one right now is finding a solid spot to pitch camp. So he grabs his pack and heads deep into the woods. Not long after setting out, Josh spots a creek. He immediately decides to follow it up the hill. The third team is Alex and Logan, a father-son duo. As soon as Dad Alex touches down, he wastes no time rushing toward his son's zone. The 10 items this duo picked are a bow and arrows paracord, a fishing net, an axe, a multi-tool, hooks, lines, a pot of tarp, a saw, and emergency rations. But on his hike, Alex hits a nasty swamp. With dense, tangled branches on both sides totally blocking the path, his trek is about to get brutal. If he goes around it, it'll cost him precious time getting to his son. But pushing straight through means risking getting bogged down. After a quick debate, Alex decides to just bust right through the swamp. Back in Connecticut, Alex works as a hunter and adventurer. He served in the military for years, and that long military career gave him serious survival chops. Coming out here, he's got 2 goals. One is to use this long isolation to bond deeper with his son. 2 is to give his kid a real rite of passage, teaching him that life is tough, and the true meaning of grit and responsibility. Then Alex carefully steps on the firmer patches of the bog, steadily making his way. But not far in, he spots a pile of black bear scat. That means there's a bear working this area. He goes on high alert instantly. But what Alex is really worried about is his 19-year-old son, Logan. He knows his son lacks field experience and he doesn't want him getting hurt out here in the wild. Alex doesn't dare pause for a second. He picks up the pace, just wanting to get out of this hot zone and find his kid quick. Meanwhile, the weather in Logan's zone is going south. High winds mixed with rain make the rugged terrain almost impassable. With every step, he has to grip onto branches and stay dialed in. One wrong move and he's taking a spill. But right now, Logan is stressed about his dad. He has no idea if his dad's okay or if he's out there pushing toward his zone. Logan catches a break, though. After hiking the trail for over half an hour, he finds a small clearing. Looking at this gnarly weather, pushing forward isn't the smart play. So he has to scrap the plan to find his dad for now and sets up camp right there. He strings up his tarp tight between two large trees and rolls out his sleeping bag underneath. It's a rough shelter, but it blocks the wind and rain, and it's done. Looks like he'll have to tough it out here for the night while praying his dad stays safe. The fourth team dropping in is brothers Shannon and Jesse. Maybe Lady Luck is on Jesse's side. Right off the bat, on a dead log, he scores a bunch of turkey tail mushrooms. That's prime stuff for boosting your immune system. For the challenge, the brothers picked a fishing net, a tarp, a bow and arrows, hooks, lines, a pot, a saw, a multi-tool, a canteen, and 2 emergency rations. From Alaska, these brothers are no joke. The younger brother, Jesse, is a military vet with 10 years of service, armed with crazy mental toughness and bushcraft skills. Older brother Shannon is a seasoned fisherman and hunter, a master at harvesting meat. Both are adrenaline junkies who regularly tackle hardcore wilderness environments. Years of battling the ocean and the backcountry taught them how unforgiving survival is. They even stated flat out, unless it's the bitter end, they aren't tapping out. Knowing the hike is a brutal slog, Jesse stepped up and took on the mission to find his brother. Shannon holds down the drop zone to build the shelter and lay the groundwork for their survival. The path forward is rough as hell. He's surrounded by dense salal brush with sharp leaves and tangled vines. You can trip on almost anything, so every step takes serious focus. Jesse finally busts through the brush only to find a heavy game trail used by black bears, but being a vet, he's got ice in his veins. Dead-eyed, without flinching a bit, he calmly marches right down the game trail. That kind of raw grit really makes you respect the guy. At the same time, Brad is still humping it toward Josh. He's been hiking for miles through the timber without finding a single piece of flat ground. His clothes are soaked through with rain and sweat, sticking cold to his skin, making him miserable. Seeing the light starting to fade, he knows reaching his brother's zone tonight is pretty much out of the question. Top priority right now is finding a dry spot to get a makeshift shelter up ASAP. Otherwise, spending the night out in the open means risking a black bear attack. He scours the area and finally spots a fallen log. It's relatively dry here, making it a solid spot for a shelter. He quickly ties his tarp to some nearby branches. 10 minutes later, a basic shelter is good to go. Just as he's soaking in the satisfaction of finishing his camp, he looks up and spots a dead widowmaker leaning dangerously close to his camp. To keep from getting crushed by falling branches in the middle of the night, Brad grabs some cordage and pulls the dead wood down, securing his perimeter. Meanwhile, his brother Josh has been hiking aimlessly up the mountain for hours. He knows full well his main objective right now is to find a decent spot to pitch a shelter, gather some basic survival resources, and sit tight waiting for his brother, making sure his brother's hard trek wasn't for nothing. But the dense brush is seriously slowing him down. With every step, he has to bushwhack and push branches out of his way. Just as he's trying to figure out how to pick up the pace, suddenly his foot slips. He loses his balance and goes down hard. A blinding pain shoots through his ankle. He struggles to get back up, but finds he can't put any weight on it. It's a severe sprain. To make matters worse, most of his gear is still back at the beach. Left with no choice, he drags his busted ankle, fighting through the pain, and makes a brutal push back to the shore to get his kit. However, the woods are a maze, and the panic from the pain clouds his judgment. Not only does he fail to find his gear, he ends up totally turned around, in unfamiliar territory. The agonizing pain in his ankle hasn't let up at all, and now he's dealing with being lost. This 1-2 punch completely breaks Josh's mental game. The thought of tapping out takes over his mind. Finally, he hits his breaking point. Without hesitation, he gets on the comms and calls to tap out. Before long, the crew comes flying in on a chopper. When the rescue team arrives, Josh's eyes are full of guilt and regret. He opens up to the camera. My journey has only just begun for it to end so quickly. Let my brother down, a family. I think I'm done. I'm sorry I haven't been here a couple hours, but I don't think I can do this. He never expected to drop in this morning and tap out by the afternoon. Not only did he fail to fight alongside his brother, but he also let him down, becoming the fastest tap out in Alone history. Supported by the medics, Josh climbs into the rescue chopper and sadly exits the competition. Meanwhile, his brother Brad is resting at camp. Suddenly, the roar of a chopper outside gives him a sinking feeling. He immediately steps out to ask the crew about Josh's status. Is Josh okay? Josh is taking himself out of the competition. He sustained an ankle injury. Is he okay? He's okay. Hearing that his brother tapped out due to a sprained ankle, Brad's face instantly drops. That's definitely tough to hear. I'm glad he's okay. But that was definitely in this for long run, so it's tough. His eyes are filled with disbelief and frustration. Going out early like this is a massive bummer. In the end, he silently packs up his gear full of mixed emotions and boards the extraction bird, bringing their alone journey to a sudden, abrupt end. With Brad and Josh out, 6 teams remain in the field. After a long hike, Brooke finally finds the perfect spot to build her shelter. 2 pine trees can act as natural pillars. By just stacking logs horizontally against them, she can save a ton of building time. Brooke immediately dives into the heavy lifting of building her shelter. First, she harvests a bunch of logs nearby and stacks them between the 2 pines. Once it reaches a good height, she adds 2 more logs on the sides to act as crossbeams. She lashes one end tight to the pine trees with paracord, then drapes her tarp over the top. She systematically layers the surrounding area with gathered branches. This not only reinforces the structure, but also provides solid protection from the wind and rain. After over 3 hours of hard work, a rough but sturdy shelter is finally up. Looking at what she built, Brooke lets out a long sigh of relief. Right now, her only hope is that her husband arrives safely and soon. Night falls fast. Alex is tossing and turning in his makeshift shelter. His mind is consumed with worry for his son, Logan. He might be a battle-tested veteran, but his kid is his biggest weak spot. He keeps running through every worst-case scenario in his head. Did Logan find a safe camp? Does he have enough food and water? Is he being stalked by predators? Just thinking about the dangers his son might be facing makes Alex wish he could teleport right to his side. And his worries aren't unfounded. Just as Logan is about to bed down, a clear noise echoes from right outside camp. In the dead silence of the wild, that sound is chilling. As the footsteps get closer, Logan guesses it's likely a black bear. He gathers his courage and yells out into the dark, trying to scare it off. But that trick doesn't seem to work. Out of options, Logan carefully pokes his head out to check. Big mistake. He gets the shock of his life when he sees 2 massive eyes locked dead onto him. 19-year-old Logan has never faced anything like this. He's absolutely terrified, cold sweat pouring down his back. But he forces himself to stay cool and quickly hits his bear horn. The piercing blast echoes through the night sky. Finally, the sudden noise successfully spooks the bear away, but Logan doesn't dare close his eyes. He can only sit there, praying silently that the bear doesn't circle back. Looks like tonight is going to be a sleepless one. Day 2 rolls around. The 5th team dropping in is brothers Ted and Jim. Early in the morning, with his stomach growling, Ted heads down to the shoreline, hoping for some luck. The tide has just rolled out, which means the beach is bound to be hiding some good eats. For this challenge, the brothers packed a saw, a bow and arrows, a gill net, a tarp snare wire, hooks and line, a pot, a multi-tool, an axe, and emergency rations. Sure enough, as soon as Ted hits the beach, he spots a few limpets on the rocks. He snatches them up without hesitating. He pops out the fresh meat, gives it a quick rinse in the salt water, and downs it raw. Turns out they're super chewy and actually taste pretty good. Only problem is there aren't nearly enough. The 2 brothers from Toronto run a mapping company together. Older brother Jim is also a seasoned adventurer. These guys spend all their time out in the mountains and waters. They once survived in the frozen wastelands of Labrador for half a month. During that trip, they had to source all their own food, shelter, and warmth. That trial by fire gave them some hardcore survival skills. Taking on this challenge, they mainly want to put their lifetime of skills to the ultimate test. Winning the prize money would just be the cherry on top. Unfortunately, Ted flips over every rock on the beach and comes up empty. Those limpets aren't even close to enough calories to sustain him. If he wants to survive long term, he's got to figure out how to harvest some real protein. Without wasting time, he gets to work setting up his gill net, praying for a massive haul on the next tide. Meanwhile, his older brother Jim is bushwhacking through dense timber. Branches are constantly tearing at his clothes. The dead leaves are piled thick on the ground, making every step a serious slog. But luck is on his side. Along the way, Jim stumbles onto a beautiful patch of chanterelles. In a wilderness stripped of resources, this is a seriously high-value score. He bags them up immediately to save for a rainy day. A few hundred yards later, he breaks out onto an open lake. Checking his compass, his brother Ted should be right across the water. But the lake is massive. Swimming straight across is obviously out of the question. Left with no choice, Jim marks his spot, zeroes in on a tall aspen tree on the far shore as his target, and starts skirting the edge of the lake. After a grueling 2-hour hike, he finally hits his waypoint. From here, he just needs to stay on his compass bearing and keep pushing. The brothers are inches away from reuniting. Brody and Chris are the 6th duo to drop in. Maybe the long travel has Brody worn out because shortly after hitting the trail, he slips on the slick ground and takes a hard spill. The impact knocks the wind out of him, keeping him down for a minute. He feels a sharp, piercing pain in his knee. Looks like a twist. Luckily, after catching his breath and checking it out, it isn't anything major. After taking a breather and stretching it out, he's back on the march to find his brother. For this challenge, the 10 items the brothers brought include an axe, hooks and line, a saw, a gill net, 2 pots, 2 sleeping bags, a bivy cover, and 2 tarps. Back home in LA, the brothers grew up working on a farm. They're used to living that simple life, working from sunup to sundown. That grind of farm life didn't just build their hardcore work ethic, it also gave them a solid foundation of practical wilderness skills. Hunting and trapping is basically second nature to them. In their eyes, no matter how brutal the environment gets, as long as they stick together, they can survive anything. So they are dead set on taking home that 500K. Finally, after a brutal grinding hike, Brody makes it down to a shoreline, but staring at the vast stretch of water and the towering peak on the other side, a wave of defeat hits him. According to his compass, he still needs to hump it over that mountain to link up with his brother Chris. However, the non-stop hiking has him completely gassed. He's burning through the last of his energy reserves. Right now, he simply doesn't have the gas in the tank to keep pushing. He has to call an audible. He's going to find a safe spot here to set up camp, crash for the night, and recharge before making the push up the mountain. At the same time, his brother Chris is looking to get some calories in his system and locks his sights on some kelp washed up on the shore. Right now, he's still 5 miles away from his brother. At this rate, linking up is going to take a while. To help Brody find his spot without getting turned around, Chris uses some plastic bottles he scavenged, tying them up on branches along the shore to make a clear breadcrumb trail. Once his brother spots these markers, he can just follow the path straight in, right into camp. Meanwhile, a heavy downpour hits Alex's zone. Rain is pouring through the canopy, and the muddy ground makes pushing forward an absolute nightmare. Out of options, he has to hunker down in camp and wait out the storm. Right now, the father and son are still almost 10 miles apart. Staring into the thick timber, Alex can't shake the heavy worry for his kid. After all, Logan is barely an adult. He's green and has never faced a brutal wilderness survival test like this. He's terrified his young son won't be able to handle the pressure. But right in the middle of his worrying, the sudden heavy thump of a chopper breaks the silence of the wild. His stomach drops, and a massive sense of dread washes over him. When the crew touches down, he immediately asks them for a sidetrap. Is this a courtesy call? What's going on, guys? Is something going on with Logan? We're going to pull you out and bring you over to Logan. Alex quickly packs his gear, hops in the extraction bird, and rushes over to his son's drop zone. The moment he lays eyes on his kid, all that anxiety evaporates. He immediately checks in to see what happened. What happened, bub? I thought it would be easier. The weather, the animals, seeing the terrain. This was done. Well, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. Like I shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. So that's it. It's all you can do. Okay. You know, you're all right. You didn't get hurt. Put it behind you and move on. Turns out, ever since that black bear rolled up on Logan's camp last night, the young, inexperienced kid lost his nerve. Dealing with big predators totally spooked him, and he just panicked. It drained all his grit to stay in the fight. Add in the brutal conditions out here, and after thinking it over, Logan finally chose to pull the plug. In the end, father and son pack their bags, board the chopper, and sadly bring their alone journey to a close. Pushing into day 3. With Alex and Logan tapping out, 5 teams remain in the field. The final duo to drop in is Pete and Sam at 61. Pete is the oldest survivalist out here. Since his stamina and endurance aren't what they used to be, the brutal hiking mission falls on the shoulders of his 20-something son, Sam. Right now, Pete's makeshift shelter is fully built. All he has to do now is sit tight and wait for Sam to show up. For this challenge, their 10 chosen items are a gill net, hooks and line, snare wire, paracord, a saw, an axe, a pot, emergency rations, and 2 tarps. The father and son hail from Maryland. Pete is a well-known local hunter and fisherman. He knows the flora and fauna like the back of his hand, and he's honed some hardcore survival skills. Growing up under his dad's wing, Sam has been hooked on the outdoors since he was a kid. He loves trailing his dad, bushwhacking through the mountains and rivers. Over the years, he's built up a solid resume for field experience. Taking on this challenge, Pete's first goal is to spend this unforgettable wilderness trip with his boy. Second, he wants to use this chance to see if his son actually has what it takes to survive a worst-case scenario on his own. But since touching down, Pete hasn't had a single bite of real protein. His stomach is screaming at him. The tide is currently rolling out. Backed by years of field experience, Pete knows this is prime time to cast a line. So he grabs his gear, heads down to the shallows, and goes full fisherman mode. Sure enough, the old man still got it. Less than 10 minutes after casting out, he feels a heavy tug on the line. Pete reacts with lightning speed, sets the hook, and hauls a kelp, greenling, straight onto the rocks. It ain't a monster, but it's enough to fill his belly for a meal. Staring down at his catch, a confident grin spreads across Pete's face. Meanwhile, Sam is having a rough go of it. While his dad is living it up in camp eating fresh fish, Sam is laying in a bare bones bivvy, listening to the rain beat down, his hunger pangs getting worse. The second the rain lets up a bit, Sam packs his kit, checks his compass bearing, and hits the trail again to find his old man. Every few hundred yards, he lets out a yell. But in this vast valley, he gets zero response, only his own echo bouncing around the wild. But he knows yelling isn't just about locating his dad, it's about fighting off the crushing isolation and anxiety. After finally busting out of the thick brush, he hits a wall, a wide, deep river cutting right across his path. In these conditions, trying to ford it straight across is basically suicide. Out of options, Sam starts bushwhacking carefully downstream along the bank, hoping to find some shallows to cross safely. On the other side, Dave pushed through the rain and now his clothes are completely soaked. To keep his only spare clothes bone dry for later, he bites the bullet and keeps humping it in his wet gear. With that freezing, wet fabric sticking to his skin, a biting cold rips right through his core, making him shiver uncontrollably. After squaring his gear away, he keeps pushing forward on the hunt for his wife. Meanwhile, even though Brooke has her shelter totally built, spending the night in it still has her shivering from the cold. Wanting her husband to live like a king when he finally arrives from his long hike, Brooke decides to build a stone fireplace right inside. She gets right to work. First, she digs out a pit in the center. Next, she lines the bottom with rocks, packing the base and sides in tight. She rings the pit with a layer of stones and finally builds a reflector wall out of logs, plugging the gaps with cedar boughs. Just like that, a legit fireplace that blocks the wind and traps heat is good to go. Next, Brooke shaves off some dry tinder with her knife. She strikes her ferro rod a dozen times and the tinder catches easy. Before long, a warm, roaring fire is blazing in camp. Staring into the dancing flames, Brooke feels a deep sense of comfort. She can't help but think, if only her husband was right here beside her to share this warmth and peace, it'd be perfect. Day 4. Unable to score any protein, Shannon is sitting by the shore, choking down a kelp feast. After getting his fill, he starts combing the beach line, hunting for any usable scavenged gear. He barely walks a few yards before spotting a plastic crate washed up on the rocks. This is a massive find. With a little MacGyvering, it'll make a killer crab trap. From here on out, an all-you-can-eat crab buffet is riding entirely on this crate. Strapping this epic piece of beachcombing treasure to his back and dragging a dead log, Shannon happily humps it back to camp. At the same time, his little brother Jesse is steadily grinding away on his bearing. When he finally hits the coastline, Jesse is stoked. Trying to cut time on the descent, he literally just slides right down the steep embankment. But when he hits the bottom, riding that high, his smile instantly drops. It's quickly replaced by pure disappointment. He thought he was staring down the home stretch to his brother's camp. But pulling out his compass, he realizes Shannon's drop zone is actually on the entire other side of this mountain. Jesse snaps and lets out a string of curses, feeling completely helpless. But getting pissed off doesn't burn calories. After getting his head right, he plunges back into that impenetrable, suffocating brush. Along the way, Jesse fights through thickets, leaps over muddy ravines, dodges razor-sharp thorns, and finally busts through the timber, popping out on the other side of the mountain. But looking up, the sight plunges him right back into despair. It's a wall of jagged rocks and sheer cliff faces everywhere. There is literally no path forward. In this moment, Jesse's spirit is crushed. The mix of brutal fatigue and heavy disappointment drains almost all his drive to keep pushing. That grimace on his face and the slumped posture, even through a screen, you can feel the guy's heartache and total helplessness. Over with Ted, the sun finally breaks through for some epic weather. It's a rare window of opportunity, so he heads down to the shoreline to throw some lines in. But nothing ever goes to plan out here. Not long after casting his hook, a crab snips his line clean off. Even after retying a new line and trying again, he works his tail off for zero payoff. Making matters worse, his line ends up in a massive bird's nest tangle. Thinking about burning another 30 minutes just untangling monofilament, Ted gets pretty frustrated. He finally just scraps the fishing plan entirely and decides to go check the gill net he set yesterday. Walking over, Ted isn't holding his breath. But against all odds, his gill net pulled in an absolute monster haul. Bagging 5 kelp greenlings in one shot, this sudden massive win has Ted absolutely fired up. Tonight, he's finally eating a real fat meal. As night falls, his brother Jim is living a completely different reality. Since the drop, he hasn't scored a single decent piece of protein. Starving and desperate, he targets the local slugs. Back home, he'd never even consider putting one of these things in his mouth. He used to wonder why Alan from season 1 ever ate these things. But right now, he completely understands Alan's situation. At this point, Jim is beyond caring. He tosses the slugs straight into his pot for a hard boil. Once they're fully cooked, he eagerly slices a tiny piece off and pops it in his mouth to taste. The taste is, well, indescribable. It's so good, it literally brings tears to Jim's eyes. Rolling into day 5. Resting in camp, Jesse's mind is totally blank. Days of relentless rain have soaked his clothes to the core. Plastered to his skin, the bone-chilling cold is constantly eating away at his body. What makes him even more desperate is humping a 50-pound pack and trudging through slick, muddy bush. Every time he wants to tap out, the image of his brother Shannon pops into his head, keeping him fired up. Jesse knows he absolutely cannot let his brother down. No matter how brutal it gets, he's got to grit his teeth and push through. Once the rain lets up a bit, Jesse packs his gear and hits the trail again. After days of this grueling trek, he feels like he's getting closer and closer to Shannon's drop zone. The anticipation is building. He cups his hands and screams his brother's name, but the only answer he gets is dead silence. Maybe it's that brotherly bond, because miles away, Shannon almost senses his brother calling out and yells out a hey of his own. But the shout gets swallowed by the pouring rain and crashing waves. Shannon isn't even sure if he actually heard his brother. Getting no echo back, he keeps walking the tide line, hunting for usable washed up gear. Luckily, he actually scores a plastic bottle. Back at camp, he quickly cuts the bottle in half, then uses his knife to cut a hole in the plastic crate he found earlier. He rigs the bottle to the crate, and just like that, a legit crab trap is born. But he needs one more stick to finish the job. Shannon gets up and heads into the timber to find the right piece of wood, but things go south fast. Barely out of camp, his foot slips, he loses his balance, and goes down hard. Pain shoots straight from his spine all the way down his lower body, paralyzing him. Judging by his twisted face and how he's writhing, it's pretty clear this is a major game-ending injury. He tries to get back on his feet, but any slight movement triggers an unbearable, blinding pain. He's got no choice but to lay there in the dirt. Shannon hates the idea of tapping out like this, but right now, his body literally won't let him keep going. After agonizing over it for 10 minutes, Shannon swallows his pride and hits his emergency comms. Soon, the rescue boat comes flying in. The medical team hits the beach and immediately checks Shannon's injury. You can't tell. This knob here, my lower back, it just keeps shooting pain down each leg randomly. It kept getting worse. I was gonna tough it out, but it just kept getting worse. It's like a fire starts at the top of my muscle and just works all the way down to my foot. It's the strangest thing. That's where I felt it. Medic just gently pushing right here on the backbone? Is that where it hurts the most? Just north of that. Medic, I would suggest a helicopter evacuation. He's definitely done some damage. He's in a lot of pain there. If we bring your legs together, is that possible? You could try. It just really hurts. 1, 2, 3. Now let's see if we can roll you on this side. After checking him out, it looks like Shannon messed up his spine. He needs immediate hospital care. To get him there fast, the crew calls in an evac chopper. Shannon is loaded onto a backboard into the bird and is flown out of the drop zone. At the exact same time, Jesse's struggling just to get a fire going. Dealing with these soaking wet, miserable conditions, even a seasoned, hardcore outdoorsman feels totally helpless. Just as he's letting out a frustrated sigh, the sudden roar of a chopper overhead makes his stomach tie in knots. He immediately asks the crew, "What's going on? You want to know how close you were?" "You were within a mile." Hearing that his brother blew out his back and had to be pulled, Jesse doesn't complain at all. His only thought is getting to the hospital as fast as possible to be by his brother's side. To him, the 500K doesn't mean a thing compared to his brother. His brother's safety is the only priority. Jesse packs up his kit and sadly ends his 5-day wilderness run. With Shannon and Jesse tapped out, only 4 teams are left in the field. Over at Brooke's camp, she's got a pot in one hand, a stick in the other, muttering something into the deep timber. She raises the pot to the sky like a toast. Seeing the bright sunshine and feeling the breeze, she knows it's a perfect day to get work done. So she grabs her saw and heads into the brush to process some firewood. After knocking out her chores, Brooke lays her sleeping bag out on the grass, strips down to her base layers, and lays back, soaking up the glorious sunshine. Meanwhile, while other survivalists are stressing over finding food, she's already kicked into full-blown wilderness vacation mode. However, just as Brooke is zoned out in the warm sun, a shadow across the bank catches her eye. She bolts up, squints hard, and looks, holy crap, it's another gray wolf. The two lock eyes. The standoff gets real tense real fast. Maybe the wolf got spooked by Brooke's intense stare, or maybe it realized its stalking wasn't a smart play. Looking almost guilty, the wolf tucks its tail and slinks off into the brush. You'd think Brooke would run straight back to camp, but instead she decides to track it and check it out. But taking just 2 steps, seeing the massive wolf tracks in the dirt sends a cold shiver right down her spine. That snaps her right back to reality. Her life is worth more than curiosity. She snatches up her sleeping bag and books it back to camp, terrified the wolf might circle back. Day 6, Brody is walking the shoreline, when suddenly a stranded salmon catches his eye. Moving with lightning speed, he grabs his walking stick and spears the salmon hard, putting it out of its misery instantly. Holding it up to the camera, this fish is an easy 4 or 5 pounds. Brody takes his machete, expertly chops the head off, and cleans the fish right there on the rocks. He rushes straight back to his temporary shelter to get a fire going and cook it up. He figured before dark he'd be chowing down on a hot steaming meal, but out here, nature makes the rules. Getting a fire going turns into a nightmare. He grinds away from daylight into the pitch black. He strikes his ferro rod into his tinder a million times, but can't catch a single spark. Staring at that fat, juicy fish fillet, Brody's stomach is screaming at him, his mouth watering. He knows eating raw fish carries a huge risk of parasites, but right now his body is desperate for calories. He's got no choice. Brody shuts his eyes and takes a massive bite of the raw salmon. The cold, slimy meat has a harsh, fishy taste that makes him gag. But he forces it down anyway. Now that he's got some fuel in the tank, he can finally get some solid sleep tonight. Pushing into day 7, the rain shows zero signs of letting up. Pete knows the truth. Fire is life out here in the bush, and hoarding dry wood is the only way to keep that fire alive. Seeing his firewood stash running dangerously low, he heads out into the drizzle to scavenge the nearby timber for more fuel. Barely out of camp, he stumbles on something that spikes his adrenaline. Right there in the grass is a massive cluster of black bear tracks. His chest tightens. Following the trail, Pete finds several huge piles of fresh bear scat. Judging by the size and shape of the scat, this bear has got to weigh at least 300 to 400 pounds. Pete's expression goes dead serious. It's crystal clear he's right in the middle of a big boar's territory. If his son Sam crosses paths with this monster on his hike in, it could be a disaster. Not wanting to linger, he heads straight back to his shelter, silently praying that Sam makes it into camp safely. At the exact same time, Chris is cheerfully singing to his camera. Turns out today is his oldest daughter's 14th birthday. Stuck miles out in the wilderness, this is the only way he can send her his love. Because of the nonstop rain, all the wood is soaked, making fire starting a brutal chore. To guarantee he can always get a blaze going, Chris decides to build a drying rack to stack and cure his firewood. He grabs his axe, heads up the hill, chops down some solid poles, and drives them deep into the dirt. He lashes 2 crossbars across the top with fishing line and neatly stacks his split wood right on top. This way, when he builds a fire underneath, the heat doesn't just boil water and cook food, it acts as a kiln to bake the moisture out of the wood above. It's a perfect 2-for-1 setup, completely solving the wet weather fire problem. Meanwhile, Dave is still grinding away on the trail toward his wife, Brooke. Every step is a battle. Days of straight bushwhacking have drained him entirely. Just as Dave feels like he can't take another step, he breaks out into a wide open clearing. This is the flattest, clearest piece of ground he's seen since drop-off. Without hesitating, he calls it and decides to pitch camp right there. He runs a ridgeline between 2 big trees, throws his tarp over it, and boom, a quick and dirty bivvy is done. Immediately after, Dave gets to work processing firewood. But while his head is down, a massive crash echoes from the timber right behind him. Dave jumps out of his skin, whipping around to scan the brush. He knows that's not a good sound. He yells out a few times to show dominance, but gets zero response. The woods are dead silent again. That sudden scare leaves Dave completely on edge. It takes him a long time to shake off the adrenaline. He rushes to get a fire sparked. A roaring fire doesn't just push back the cold and dark, it gives Dave a psychological shield against whatever bear is out there. Rolling into the early hours of day 8. Brooke is dead asleep in her shelter when a blood-curdling scream rips through the quiet woods. Turns out a spider had silently crawled right onto her clothes. Crazy to think this hardcore woman, who was ready to stare down a wolf yesterday with zero fear, is now completely losing her mind over a tiny little bug. Brooke doesn't even try to chill out. She grabs a stick and engages in some aggressive diplomacy with the spider. "You shall not live in my house!" Spider violence. After a vicious stabbing session, the spider is nothing but mush. But she still stays on high alert all the way until daybreak. Last night's scare is still fresh in Brooke's mind. To make sure nothing like that happens again, and to give her husband a comfy place to crash when he finally arrives, Brooke decides to upgrade her sleeping setup. She builds an off-the-ground platform, then layers it thick with cedar and hemlock boughs. This blocks the ground chill and moisture and provides a solid cushion for recovery. Finally, she lays a tarp over the top, tosses her sleeping bag on it, and an epic plush wilderness bed is good to go. Brooke can't wait to test it out. Turns out it's insanely comfortable. Now all she has to do is sit tight and wait for her husband to safely arrive. Thinking about finally cuddling up with him and doing what they want to do, Brooke breaks into a huge smile. Meanwhile, about 1.6 miles away in the bush, Dave is hitting an absolute physical wall. Days of non-stop bushwhacking have left him completely gassed. Every single step is a brutal grind. What's making him even more miserable is his black t-shirt. It's soaked through with sweat and rain, mixed with mud and swamp water, and it reeks like pure death. But he doesn't want to get his spare clothes wet. After a long internal debate, Dave bites the bullet and throws the wet, nasty shirt back on. He cinches down his gear, shoulders his pack, and gets back on the grueling march for his wife. He doesn't know how long he's walked when suddenly a salty ocean breeze cuts through the trees and hits his face. That means the coastline is right here. He's getting dangerously close to his wife, Brooke. That rush of adrenaline instantly wipes out some of his fatigue, but a new obstacle blocks his path. A river. The waters is raging and moving fast. There's a dead log spanning the gap, acting like a natural bridge, but it's a good 15 to 20 feet above the water. One slip, he's taking a massive plunge into the drink. Dave isn't about to risk a game-ending injury, so he calls an audible and scraps that risky plan. He hikes down the bank until he finally finds a shallower, calmer section to ford. He carefully tests the footing and steps in. The water is heavy and covered in foam, so he can't see the bottom at all. He places every step with extreme caution, terrified of slipping or busting an ankle on a submerged rock. After a tense crossing, he makes it safely to the other side. With the finish line in sight, he digs deep and starts his final push. He only has one thought in his head: get to his wife. Over with Brody, he's still humping it toward his brother Chris. To avoid the gnarly brush and cover ground faster, he's been hiking the tide line. Right now, the tide is out, making it the perfect window to cross the water. If the water level rises, he'll get pinned down on this side without hesitating. Brody wades straight into the river. The bone-chilling water hits his knees, making him yell out in shock. His teeth are chattering uncontrollably, but he doesn't stop. He picks up the pace and powers through. Because it isn't too deep, he hits the far bank, safe and sound. He grabs his bearing and keeps pushing forward, yelling his brother's name at the top of his lungs. Chris! After a few shouts, he finally hears a familiar voice echo back. Brody's heart races. He takes off in a dead sprint straight toward the sound. Meanwhile, Sam is in deep trouble. During his grueling multi-day trek, he somehow lost his axe. He retraced his steps and scoured the brush, but came up completely empty. Out here in the wild, an axe is a critical piece of survival kit. Without it, you can't fell trees, build a solid shelter, process big game if you catch it, or even chop enough firewood to stay warm. Knowing that he and his dad might end up tapping out because he lost a crucial piece of gear, combined with the brutal exhaustion of the hike, Sam feels like he's hitting his breaking point. He has no idea how he's going to face his old man who's been waiting for him. The more he thinks, the angrier he gets. He completely loses it and lets out a massive yell into the empty woods, venting all his frustration and helplessness. Over at camp, his dad Pete is solo in the timber, scavenging for whatever resources he can find. While he works, he keeps shouting his son's name out loud. Those calls echo through the vast empty wilderness, carrying all his deep worry and hope. For the last few days, Pete has basically been surviving on scavenged kelp and limpets. That tiny amount of food isn't even close to enough calories to sustain him. He constantly stares off in the direction his son should be coming from, praying silently in his head, "Kid, if you don't get here soon, your old man ain't gonna make it." The camera cuts back to Jim. After hours of hard humping through the brush, he is completely smoked. He finds a decent clearing and immediately drops his pack to set up camp. But right after getting his tent up, he spots a fresh pile of cougar scat right next to it, and right next to that, a heavily used game trail. It's obvious. He just pitched his tent right on a mountain lion highway. But it's getting dark fast, and Jim has zero energy left to pack up and find a new spot to build a shelter. He bites the bullet, decides to roll the dice and get ready to stand his ground if the cat shows up. Night falls. While drying his pants by the fire, Jim suddenly feels that something is off. He looks up and sees a pair of glowing eyes staring dead at him from the brush. Without a second of fear, Jim snatches his axe and charges straight at it. "Cooper, let's go! Baby, come on!" This crazy burst of aggression catches the mountain lion totally off guard. Clearly, it's never seen a human act psycho. It tucks tail and vanishes instantly into the dark timber. Walking back to the fire, Jim thinks about how wild he just acted and can't help but laugh. But he knows he can't let his guard down. When he goes to sleep tonight, he has to keep one eye open. Moving to day 9, Ted's food situation hasn't gotten any better. With zero rations, he hits the shoreline again to hunt for limpets. After scouring the rocks, he finds zero limpets, but happens to spot a washed-up plastic bottle. With a little MacGyvering, he can easily turn this into a mini minnow trap. Next, he heads over to where he set his gill net to check for a catch. But before he even gets close, he can see it's completely empty. Ted knows he can't just sit around waiting to starve. He has to go on the offensive. To secure a steady source of fish, he decides to build a boat. He goes into the woods and chops down a warped sapling that makes a perfect keel. Then he finds a thick springy branch, bends it into a curve, and uses it as the main frame. He takes his fishing line and lashes cross beams to the sides. After putting in the swequity, the skeleton of the boat takes shape. Now all he has to do is wrap it tight in a tarp to waterproof it, and this DIY coracle will be ready for the water. Whether or not it'll actually catch fish remains to be seen. At the same time, Dave is getting extremely close to his wife, but Brooke has no idea. Even though she desperately hopes her husband shows up today, she tries not to get her hopes up. She knows that out here, high expectations lead to massive disappointment. Just as she's taking a walk down the beach, a massive pile of debris on the rocks catches her eye. Brooke walks up to inspect it. It's a commercial gill net, floats and all. This net isn't just huge, the material is heavy duty. If she takes the time to untangle it, it'll be an absolute game-changing fishing tool. They'll have more fish than they know what to do with. Stoked, she hauls it back to camp. But right as she's head down fixing the net, a familiar yell echoes through the trees. That sudden signal that he's here sends shivers through her whole body. She jumps up and screams back toward the timber. Her voice is shaking with pure, unfiltered joy. She runs through the brush, scanning, until finally in a clearing she spots that familiar face. The second they meet, they lock into a massive hug, showing off some serious PDA for the cameras. After checking in on him, Brooke eagerly grabs her husband's hand. She can't wait to show him the new home she built with her own hands. When Dave lays eyes on this cozy, comfortable two-person cabin, complete with an indoor stone fireplace, he is absolutely blown away. He praises every single detail of her work. He can't believe his wife pulled this whole thing off solo. To thank her for all the hard work she put in, Dave decides he's going to treat his wife right tonight. Almost at the exact same time, Sam finally breaks out of the heavy timber and hits the coastline. Following his compass, he figures his dad, Pete, has to be working this area. He walks the shore yelling at the top of his lungs. He figures he's just going to hear his own echo again. But a few seconds later, a faint but unmistakable shout cuts through the wind. Sam's heart jumps and he takes off running hard toward the sound. They round a bend and finally link up. The second Pete sees his boy, he's overwhelmed with emotion. He drops everything, walks up, and wraps his son in a massive hug. And he's my son, and I love him a lot. He can't believe his kid pushed through all that hell and actually found him. Looking at the pride in Pete's eyes, it's obvious he is incredibly proud of his son. From here on out, father and son are finally teamed up, ready to face the rest of this survival challenge together. Rolling into day 10. First thing in the morning, Brooke hits the trail to hunt for food. She knows that out in the bush, protein is the only way to keep your stamina up. Like they say, the early bird gets the worm, and the early worm gets eaten by the bird. While foraging along the coastline, Brooke actually stumbles onto a wounded duck. Without a second of hesitation, she rushes it and puts it out of its misery with one stomp. I bet this duck never saw it coming, ending up as a human's dinner like this. Brooke carries the duck back down to the beach, expertly field dresses it, gets a fire going on the spot, skewers the meat on a green stick, and roasts it right over the campfire. The flames lick the duck meat and the fat drips down onto the hot coals, sizzling loudly. The rich smell of roasting meat fills the entire camp. Once it's fully cooked, the couple sits on a dead log and dives into this epic wild feast. The meat is firm, fatty, but not dry. They take turns taking bites, absolutely loving it. It really makes you think if they keep thriving like this, they're looking like the heavy favorites to win it all. Compared to their cozy camp setup, Jim is having a miserable time. He's still humping it on the trail. Along the way, he's picking off and eating every slug he sees. After getting some calories in, he picks up the pace, pushing hard through the timber with over 50 pounds on his back. Right now, he just wants to find his brother. He keeps daydreaming about what it'll be like when they link up. Crashing in a rock-solid shelter his brother built, getting a good, safe night's sleep, and then destroying a massive seafood feast to rebuild all the energy he burned. But unfortunately, Ted isn't doing so hot either. Due to a serious lack of protein, his cheeks are already starting to sink in. To make matters worse, since the drop, he hasn't even built a decent shelter. These last few days, he's just been living under a thrown-together lean-to made of branches and a tarp. It barely blocks the wind and rain. The funny part is banking on Jim showing up quickly to help him improve their food situation. After thinking it over, though, he realizes his priority right now is to get a better shelter up. He pulls the four corners of his tarp taut, ties them off to the surrounding trees, and tosses a few crossbeams over the top to support it. But looking at the structure, it's still incredibly bare bones. Looks like he's just waiting for his brother to arrive before doing the heavy lifting to build a real camp. Classic brother move. Meanwhile, Jim's totally lost in his daydreams about their epic reunion. He's hiking with his compass, but drifting way off, not even realizing he's completely off his bearing. By the time he snaps out of it, he's staring at the bottom of a sheer cliff face. Looking up at that brutal incline, despair is written all over Jim's face. But thinking about his brother potentially cooking up a seafood feast waiting for him, Jim grits his teeth. Hope reignites in his eyes. He takes a deep breath and starts free climbing, using all fours. Even with the rocks tearing up his hands, nothing is going to stop his drive to link up. After a grueling climb, Jim finally tops out over the cliff edge. Over with Pete and Sam ever since his boy showed up, Pete has visibly relaxed. He's not battling that crushing isolation anymore. And Sam steps up to the plate. Using his skills and experience, he successfully gets a fire going. The dancing flames push back the night's chill and spark hope for the next day's survival. Now that they've got fire and a shelter locked down, the number one priority is finding food. After all, compared to surviving solo, a two-man team burns way more calories. But with an old salt fisherman like Pete and a skilled guy like Sam, it doesn't seem like an impossible mission. To save precious energy, Sam decides to rig up a few passive set lines. This way they can fish 24/7 even when they aren't at the shore. He baits the hooks with limpets, ties a rock to the bottom as a sinker, and casts the rigs out. Now all they have to do is wait for the fish to bite. cutting over to Chris and Brody. With nothing going on, the two of them are just sitting on the beach, taking in the wild scenery of Vancouver Island, letting the sea breeze blow through their hair. But a killer view isn't going to cure their hunger. After talking it over, they decide they need to get active and fish. It's the fastest way to get protein on the board. They chop down a solid branch to use as a makeshift rod, tie on their hook and line, and head out onto the rocks to play the waiting game. But the weather today is absolutely brutal. The wind is howling off the ocean and massive swells are crashing in. As soon as the hook hits the water, the raging current sweeps it away into the rocks. In these conditions, trying to catch a fish with this primitive setups is basically impossible. Watching their stash of hooks dwindle, the brothers quickly lose patience. They finally just call it quits and hike back to camp, defeated. Meanwhile, Ted is dead set on finishing his little boat. He naively thinks that once the boat is built, it'll permanently solve their food shortage. Little does he know, historically on this show, no one who built a boat made it to the end. Is he really going to be the one to break the curse? No matter how he stretches the tarp, it always comes up short. It just won't cover the entire hull. It's super frustrating. Just as Ted is pulling his hair out over it, Jim's yell suddenly echoes from the distance. Ted freezes for a second, realizes what it is, and immediately yells back. After a brutal 10-day hike, the brothers finally link up. The moment Jim sees his brother, he breaks into a massive grin. The exhaustion on his face is instantly replaced by pure joy. The brothers pull each other into a tight hug. All the suffering and grind just washes away. With that, all the remaining teams have successfully united, rolling into day 11. Even after resting up for the last 2 days, Sam's energy levels still haven't fully bounced back. That 9-day bushwhack took a massive toll on his body. But right now, there's a bigger mission, getting food on the board. Father and son head down to the shoreline, feeling confident, and check the set lines they placed yesterday. But pulling the lines in, they're hit with a harsh reality. The hooks are totally empty. The bait got stripped completely clean. Looks like passive fishing isn't going to cut it. They got to take matters into their own hands. They quickly rig up 2 poles and then go into full active fishing mode. And the old man proves he's still got it. Barely after casting, Pete feels a solid tug on his line. Yes! Lightning fast, he hauls a kelp base straight up onto the rocks. It's not a trophy fish, but it's exactly what they need to refuel their bodies. With the bite hot, he doesn't stop to celebrate. Soon after, a second and then a third fish are on the rocks. Watching Pete haul them in, Sam is absolutely mind-blown by his dad's skills. With 3 fish secured, they finally don't have to go to bed starving tonight. At the same time, Jim is staring at Ted's garbage shelter, feeling totally hopeless. He can't believe that after 10 days, this flimsy lean-to that blocks neither wind nor rain is all Ted has built. But he can't worry about that right now. They need to figure out how to get calories fast. So they divide and conquer. Ted keeps working on his little boat while Jim starts weaving a crab pot. He grabs some sturdy sticks and uses vines to lash them together into a solid cube frame. Grinding well into the night, the basic frame of the trap is finally done. But while Jim is laser focused on carving a branch, his knife suddenly slips. The razor-sharp blade slices deep into his finger. Blood starts pouring out instantly. Seeing this, Ted drops what he's doing, rips open the first aid kit, carefully cleans the wound, and bandages it tight to stop the bleeding. Luckily, the cut didn't hit bone or tendon. After patching him up, the bleeding finally stops and both brothers let out a massive sigh of relief. Moving to day 12. Pete and Sam are kicking back in camp, feasting on their catch. Once their bellies are full, they get back to the grind. Today's mission: winterize and reinforce the shelter. After days of getting battered by wind and rain, the makeshift bivvy is barely holding together. They harvest a ton of deadwood from the timber and stack it neatly around the entrance. To seal up the gaps in the walls, they weave soft hemlock boughs in piece by piece, making sure the shelter can actually block the freezing night winds. Checking back in on Jim and Ted. After grinding all night, Jim's crab trap is finally finished. To keep the crabs from squeezing out, Jim takes the gill net he salvaged and wraps the entire cage tight. Pumped up, he hauls the trap down to the water. To chum the water and draw them in, he smashes up a bunch of barnacles and stuffs them in a small mesh bait bag. This creates a scent trail, but stops the crabs from just ripping the bait off instantly. He secures the trap in the shallows, silently praying for a heavy haul, pushing into day 13. Ted and Jim sleep in, finally rolling out of bed around 8. Today is a huge deal for their survival plan. Full of hope, they hit the beach to pull the crab pot. But as soon as the trap breaks the surface, their smiles vanish. The cage is completely empty. Ted frowns, blaming it entirely on how the bait was set. But Jim isn't having it. They go back and forth, bickering non-stop on the rocks. That early excitement quickly burns down into frustration. Compared to the struggle of the other teams, Brooke and Dave are thriving. They've got a solid division of labor. Dave handles the heavy camp chores, grinding away, while Brooke takes point on the fishing. While Dave is head down splitting wood, a sudden scream rings out. Dave's stomach drops. Thinking his wife got hurt, he throws his axe down and sprints as fast as he can toward the water. But when he gets there, he sees Brooke just hauled in a massive fish. Dave doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing that the bite is hot right now, Brooke strikes while the iron is hot and casts right back out. Maybe the wilderness gods are looking out for them today, because shortly after, a second fish is on the line. Talk about a hot bite. In less than half an hour, she hauls in two big fish. Back at camp, they spark up the fire and get both fish roasting right away. Soon enough, the golden skin is sizzling with fat and the meat is giving off an insane smell. It's mouth-watering. The couple sits by the fire, feasting on this rare treat. Between bites, Dave can't stop praising his wife's fishing skills. They smile at each other, looking genuinely happy. Watching this makes you realize how strong a husband-wife team can be. Right now, they are looking like the heavy favorites to win it all. But Vancouver Island weather turns on a dime. Out of nowhere, a brutal storm slams the island. Howling winds rip across the coast and massive swells crash onto the beach. Heavy rain hammers the tarp with a deafening roar. When Jim and Ted wake up, they realize they're in serious trouble. Water is washing straight down the hill, flooding right through their shelter. Their sleeping bags and clothes are completely soaked. A bone-chilling cold sets in. The brothers look at each other, full of anxiety and helplessness. No time to complain, they scramble to drag their wet gear to the edges of the tarp. But the downpour shows no sign of stopping. This is the moment they truly understand just how powerless humans are when Mother Nature flexes her muscles. Meanwhile, Pete and Sam aren't exactly comfortable either, but they're used to it by now. Since dropping onto this island, they've been battling extreme weather nonstop. Their years of field experience keep them grounded and calm. Even with the torrential rain and howling wind, they don't stop grinding. Because they know consistently securing calories is the only way to stay in the game and get a shot at that $500 K. So father and son brave the storm, hit the shore, and cast their lines. Luck favors the prepared. Less than 20 minutes in, Pete feels a solid tug on his line. The old man gets fired up, grips the rod tight, and sets the hook. He pulls a fat frogfish straight onto the bank. Looking at this modest catch, both of them are stoked. They want to keep fishing while the bite is hot to stock up on nutrients, but nature has other plans. The wind is ripping now. Pete is getting blown around on the rocks, almost getting swept into the ocean a few times. It's way too dangerous. Sam knows that staying out here is basically rolling the dice with their lives. Left no choice, they pack their gear and hustle back to camp with what they have. But when they get back, they are absolutely stunned. Everything is soaked. The shelter is leaking like a sieve, and there's a solid 2 inches of standing water on the ground. Good thing they reinforced and upgraded the shelter earlier. With the weather this bad, all they can do is lay in their bivvy and pray the storm passes quickly. Meanwhile, Chris and Brody are getting mentally and physically tortured by this downpour. Their shelter is bare bones as it is, and now that it's flooded, the ground is pure mud. Their sleeping bags are soaked, and it's freezing. They were already running on a massive calorie deficit, and this weather just makes a bad situation worse. The worst part is, the storm shows zero signs of stopping. If it keeps up much longer, their shelter is going to completely wash out. Then they won't even have a roof over their heads, let alone a chance to survive and claim that $500 K. Rolling into day 14. The sky finally clears up, sunlight punches through the clouds, hitting the wet ground and bringing a little warmth to the wild. Seeing that the tide is out, Brooke knows the exposed beach is going to be loaded with washed-up food. After some scavenging, she actually scores a massive clam. These things are thick, the meat is tender, and they're packed with prime protein and nutrients. Brooke is hyped and takes it back to camp to roast over the coals. Top-tier wild game only needs the simplest cooking method. Once it's fully cooked, Dave takes a bite, eager to taste it. Surprisingly, it tastes just like chicken. They pass it back and forth, enjoying every bite. It isn't a lot of calories, but this random score takes the edge off their hunger for now. Checking back on Chris and Brody. After getting tortured all day yesterday, they are physically and mentally pushed to the brink. To survive, the brothers decide to scout for some high ground that won't flood so they can rebuild their shelter. But reality hits hard. It's a pipe dream. They bushwhack around their zone for half the day, only to realize their drop zone is basically a natural bowl, surrounded by slopes and totally low-lying. No matter where they move, all the runoff from the hills pours straight down into them. There is literally not a single flat dry spot to hide from the rain. Seeing their plan get crushed again, they give up the search and drag their exhausted bodies back to camp. On the hike back, Chris is complaining nonstop. He's just spewing negativity, and he can't seem to stop himself. The brutal environment and constant starvation are totally breaking Chris's mental game. Back at camp, Chris keeps venting. I need to explain some things about my situation. Chris even brings up Brody's daughter's birthday, trying to trigger his brother's homesickness. But Brody just stays quiet. I don't want you to leave here with regrets. Just going along with me. Seeing his brother isn't budging, Chris keeps pushing. We've never been a family that chose money over family. I mean, that's never been who we were, and that's why all this is so painful. and I want to get back there and be so much more loving than I've ever been before to my wife and kids. The best advice I can give as a brother is we need to get you home for your daughter's birthday. It's her first birthday. She won't remember it, but you will. No matter how much grit you have, hearing Chris say all that definitely messes with Brody's head. He's torn. He walks down to the beach alone, stares out at the vast ocean, and gets lost in thought. The waves crash against the shore, like an echo of his own internal struggle. To take on this challenge, he put everything on the line. He humped it over the mountain, exhausted himself, just to finally make it here. And now, after grinding for only 14 days, is he really just going to pull the plug? It eats away at him. But he's caught in a tug of war. On one side is his loyalty to his brother, and on the other is that massive 500K prize, plus all the sweat and pain he's already invested. Brody has never felt so conflicted. He knows his brother's heart is already completely back home. Chris has absolutely no drive left to stay in the fight. Without a unified team, even if he forces Chris to stay, they'll just be draining each other's energy. They'll never make it to the end, especially since his brother is notoriously stubborn. Add in the days of suffering, and Chris's resolve is completely gone. After thinking it through, Brody ultimately rests his brother's call. In the end, Chris gets on the comms and calls the tap out. Hey, this is Chris. We're officially tapping out. The crew quickly arrives on a boat. Looking at the camera, Chris explains, the idea of being gone for an extended period of time from my family was very difficult for them to accept, and I carried that out here with me. You have mixed feelings about it, but right now I'm just thinking about getting back home, for my daughter's birthday. It's a big deal. I'm looking forward to that. You'd think two brothers working together would be unstoppable, ready to take on the wilderness side by side. But this team, who linked up earliest and looked like serious contenders, couldn't beat their own homesickness and the brutal reality of the wild. It just goes to show picking the right partner is way more important than raw skills. If you want to go the distance, you got to choose wisely and find someone ready to embrace the suck and fight by your side. The brothers pack their gear, hop on the evac boat, and end their 14-day alone journey, pushing to day 15. With Chris and Brody tapping out, only 3 teams are left in the field. First thing in the morning, Ted is on the rocks throwing up. He's pale and totally drained. Turns out he gorged on too much kelp lately, and it wrecked his stomach. To play it safe, Ted has to stay back in the shelter and rest, which means the pressure to secure food falls entirely on Jim's shoulders. Jim doesn't slack off. He grabs his fishing rod, heads straight to the beach, and goes to work. Almost right after casting out, he gets a hit. Jim sets the hook hard and hauls a flying fish right out of the water. This fast catch gets him super hyped, but before he can even celebrate, the fish thrashes wildly, spits the hook, splashes back into the ocean, and disappears. After shaking off the disappointment, Jim gets his head back in the game. He quickly moves to a new spot, a flatter point with better casting water. He doesn't know it yet, but the gears of fate started turning the second he cast that line, and the brothers' massive comeback is about to kick off. 30 minutes after casting, his rod bends again. And this time the drag is heavy and steady. He doesn't mess around, slowly reeling it in, and successfully drags a fat kelp greenling straight onto the rocks. Jim is absolutely pumped. The cheers echo down the empty coastline. Back at camp, resting in the shelter, Ted hears his brother hollering and instantly perks up. He heads down to the water, celebrating this hard-earned catch with Jim from a distance. You got a fish! Yeah, he got a fish! In that moment, all the exhaustion and anxiety are wiped out by this sudden massive win. Jim looks up at the seagulls circling overhead. With his field experience, he immediately knows this water is absolutely loaded with fish. It's a straight-up honey hole. Jim strikes while the iron is hot. He picks up the pace. Sure enough, not long after casting, he hauls in another kelp greenling, and what blows his mind even more is that almost every cast after that gets a bite. Hey, here's another one. Don't mind if I get one more of those, and that's 8. Yeah, baby, we're getting somewhere here. Just like that, Jim fishes non-stop for an hour. The rod just keeps bending. The high of the harvest never fades. After hauling the last greenling onto the rocks, he counts his haul, a whopping 16 fish, and every single one is thick and fat. This feeling of hitting the jackpot out here in the wild beats scoring any kind of wealth back in the city. Meanwhile, Brooke and Dave are grinding away on their permanent log cabin. They know Vancouver Island weather is completely unpredictable. Gale force winds and torrential rain can hit at any second. If they want to survive the long haul on this rock, they need to build a rock-solid, insulated cabin that can weather the storm. True veterans never settle for short-term comfort. The couple has a clear division of labor, working together like a well-oiled machine. Dave is on lumberjack duty, felling trees, while Brooke bucks the logs down to size. Dave also handles the heavy lifting of hauling and stacking, but building a log cabin is backbreaking work, especially running on bare-bones tools, starvation rations, and a depleted body. Every step is a massive grind. After finally getting one wall up, they hit a physical wall. They collapse on the ground, sucking wind, muscles screaming. But there's no turning back now. They know no matter how much it hurts, they have to get this cabin built. At the same time, Pete and Sam are struggling to get a fire going. All their twigs and firewood are soaked to the core. Trying to spark a fire in these conditions is a nightmare. But they aren't throwing in the towel. They know when things get this grim, you have to stay level headed. They head out and gather a massive pile of twigs. Sure enough, with enough twigs, they finally get a flame roaring, and they don't waste the extra pine pitch they found. They put it in a shell, heat it over the coals until it melts, then mix it with some processed tinder. After stirring it up, they've created an ultimate waterproof fire starter. This stuff catches a spark easy and burns long and hot. Even in a soaking wet environment, it lights right up. Now, getting a fire going is no longer a crisis, cutting back to Jim and Ted. Staring at a pot, stuffed full of greenlings, their eyes are wide with disbelief and hype. They immediately spark a fire, hang the pot, and get the cleaned fish boiling. A rich fishy broth smell fills the air. It drifts through the wild, making their mouths water and warming their spirits. After getting wrecked by the storm and feeling totally drained, they never expected a turnaround like this. The comeback hits hard and fast. And out here, luck loves to strike when you least expect it. Just as they're soaking in the joy of cooking and waiting for the fish to finish, a duck gets drawn in by the smell. It waddles right up to the campfire. Jim doesn't hesitate for a second at this free protein. He grabs his hat and just swats the duck hard. How's that for a menu? Fish for dinner tonight, duck for breakfast tomorrow. These two brothers, who were starving and just trying to survive together, have completely flipped the script. They went from barely surviving to straight up living. This crazy stroke of luck easily makes them the happiest guys in the bush right now. Moving to day 17, only 3 teams left in the field. Ted and Jim, thanks to that epic 16-fish haul from the other day, have finally shaken off starvation. Their depleted bodies have regained some serious stamina, but they know they can't get complacent. So they dive right back into finishing their little boat. After all, this is their ticket to a steady food supply. Knowing the boat has to hold both of their weight, the frame has to be incredibly sturdy. No cutting corners. They split the chores. Jim gathers materials while Ted reinforces the hull. Using thick branches and tough vines, he lashes the frame tight, making sure it can take a beating from the waves. After grinding for half the day, the skeleton of the boat is finally done. The last step is wrapping the tarp around the hull to waterproof it. This is the brothers' first time ever building a boat. They aren't 100% confident, they just hope the thing actually floats. Meanwhile, Brooke and Dave are still busting their humps building their log cabin over the last few days. They haven't stopped working for a second. Even as they lose weight and run out of gas, they just grit their teeth and push. Dave is the head foreman on the build. With his solid bushcraft skills, he dials in every single detail perfectly. Brooke is on full-time food duty, keeping them fueled up, and speak of the devil, she just effortlessly hauled in a 2-pound greenling. Brooke is stoked. The fish is thick, the meat is fresh, and it's plenty for a solid meal for the two of them. She takes her knife and quickly dispatches the fish. If they can pull in a steady catch like this every day, the couple is looking untouchable for the championship. No one is going to knock them out. Rolling into day 18. The walls of the cabin are finally nearing completion. Dave stacks the heavy logs one by one, methodically sealing up the shelter tight. Day 19. Brooke doesn't just sit around. She jumps right into the build, helping Dave dial in the finishing touches. To make sure the inside stays warm, she chinks every crack in the walls with moss. This blocks out the freezing drafts, traps the heat, and keeps the bugs out. Chinking logs is tedious, exhausting work, but Brooke gets after it with a smile. As Dave drops the final log into place, the framework of their wilderness mansion is officially up. He even carefully left a cutout for the stone fireplace, so they can heat the place and cook inside. Staring at this legit log cabin they built by hand, they are incredibly proud. Now, all they have to do is finish the roof and build the chimney, and the house will be 100% done. Then they can ride out the freezing wilderness inside a warm, cozy home. Meanwhile, Ted and Jim's boat is finally ready for its maiden voyage. They strap on their life jackets, carry the boat down to the water together, and carefully climb in. Surprisingly, this janky little boat floats perfectly stable on the surface. It works way better than they expected. They paddle the boat out toward deeper water by the rocks. A light breeze ripples the ocean, sunlight sparkles on the water. Once they hit their spot, they immediately break out the rods and start fishing. They're hoping to use the boat to repeat that epic 16-fish day. But reality hits them like a ton of bricks. They paddle around, hitting multiple spots, but the rods don't even twitch. The freezing water, the endless waiting, the sting of getting skunked, slowly drains their morale. Defeated, they reel in their lines, slowly paddle the boat around, and drag themselves back to shore. Honestly, though, the brothers aren't totally shocked by this. Wilderness survival is all about the unknown. Luck doesn't last forever, and nothing comes easy, but They firmly believe this boat is a massive asset. The timing just wasn't right today. If they stick with it, eventually they'll use this boat to haul in some serious calories. Moving to day 20, Pete and Sam decide to conserve calories by just laying in camp and doing absolutely nothing. But after lying there for a bit, they realize you can't just starve to win. They gotta find a way to get food, so Pete takes Sam back down to the water to cast some lines. Sadly, since he got here, Sam hasn't managed to catch a single fish. The entire survival burden is resting on the old man's shoulders. On paper, Sam has all the tools. He was taught by his dad and even has a degree in fisheries. He's got the textbook knowledge and the pro techniques, but since dropping out here, it's like he's cursed. No matter how hard he tries or how he switches up his bait and spots, he gets zero action. To make matters worse, Pete's luck dried up today, too. By 2 p.m., the lines still haven't moved an inch. They have to call it and trudge back to camp empty-handed, pushing into day 21. Brooke and Dave are still grinding on their cabin. Today, they decide to build the stone chimney. They get right to work. Brooke hikes back and forth from the beach, hauling heavy rocks up the hill. Running on zero nutrients and zero gas, she's incredibly weak. Seeing how exhausted his wife is, Dave is worried sick. He steps in, telling her there's no rush, not to push herself to the breaking point. After all, your body is your most important tool out here. But Brooke is stubborn as hell. She doesn't back down for a second and just keeps grinding on the build, totally blowing off her husband's advice. As the days grind on, the temps are steadily dropping. But brothers Ted and Jim still have zero plans to upgrade their shelter. They're still roughing it under that initial flimsy lean to catching cold drafts from every side. Even though they don't care about their camp, the brothers are absolutely obsessed with catching fish. They know reeling in fish is the only way to get calories, survive this freezing wilderness, and stay in the fight for the grand prize. So, they haul their little boat back down to the water. But today, they're switching up their strategy. They're going with a two-pronged attack. Jim is taking the boat out to fish the deeper water, while Ted stays on shore to fur for kelp, clams, snails, and whatever else washes up. This way, even if Jim gets skunked, they can still rely on scavenged shellfish to take the edge off their hunger. But reality is brutal out here. Jim sits out on the ocean, freezing and waiting for 2.5 hours. Not a single nibble on the line. Finally, he has to paddle back, returning to shore empty-handed. The brothers stand on the beach, frowning. They're completely baffled. They found a prime fishing hole, so why aren't the fish biting? They know the truth. If this dry spell keeps up, they'll be tapping out in a matter of days. Pushing to day 22. Pete and Sam have gone 2 straight days without catching a single fish. The starvation is really setting in, but there's no quit in these guys. Today, father and son decide to scout out a new fishing spot. After a brutal hike through the bush, they finally locate a killer spot. It's wide open, the water is dead calm, and the bank is loaded with kelp. The sun is shining right on it. It's an absolute dream spot for any angler. Wasting no time, the father and son duo cast their lines and get straight to work, fully expecting this new hole to change their luck. After over an hour of patiently waiting, Sam's line finally gets a hit. Heart racing, he pulls back hard to reel it in. But right as he's about to haul it onto the rocks, the fish thrashes, spits the hook, and splashes back into the water, vanishing instantly. Sam is left holding a dead rod, his face painted with pure shock and devastation. Seeing his boy so defeated breaks Pete's heart. He knows right now Sam desperately needs a win to get his confidence back. Luckily, the old man still has the magic touch. In just under an hour, he hauls in 3 fish. Every single one is thick and fat. It's plenty of meat for a solid meal. Even though Sam is still getting skunked, his dad's encouragement and the fresh protein give them the fuel they need to keep grinding, pushing into day 23. They trudge back to camp, praying that cut on Jim's finger doesn't get infected. Day 24, Brooke and Dave decide today is moving day. But before they move in, they need to finish the fireplace and dial in the interior. Just as they're putting the finishing touches on the chimney, the clear sky suddenly blackens. The wind starts howling. A massive storm is rolling in fast. To keep their move-in day on track, the couple drops what they're doing to get the roof sealed up tight. They quickly rip the tarp off their old bivvy, drape it carefully over the new cabin's roof, and use paracord to lash it down tight to all 4 corners. Inside, they use branches to support the ceiling, making sure the roof is structurally sound and won't pool up with water. Wasting nothing, they take all the leftover wood from the old lean-to and haul it into the new cabin. They stack some around the fireplace to reinforce the stone walls and use the rest to build out their beds. With everything locked down, Dave eagerly sparks a fire in the chimney. As the flames catch, the warm glow lights up their faces. The cabin instantly fills with warmth and light and smells like wood smoke. In this moment, the brutality of the wild vanishes. There's no survival stress, just the comfort and peace of a real home. But a cozy cabin isn't complete without a soft bed. Brooke takes the spruce boughs she gathered and layers them thick over the wooden bed frames. Just like that, 2 simple but insanely comfortable beds are done. Then Dave takes out his knife and carefully carves their names right above the stone fireplace. He rubs charcoal into the grooves to make the letters pop. After a massive day of work, the exhausted couple sits on the bed by the fire, soaking in the heat. They know if they just keep grinding, they're going to walk away with the win. Fast forward to day 27, three teams remain in the field. For Ted and Jim, survival still isn't getting any easier. That crab pot they poured so much work into hasn't caught a single thing since they dropped it. But the brothers aren't quitting. They have serious grit. Lately, they've been spending every single day grinding on the hunt for calories. Today's they decide to move the crab pot out into deeper water. Jim hops in the boat and paddles out, full of hope. So they don't lose track of it. Jim ties a washed up fire extinguisher to the line to act as a buoy. He drops the trap into the deep blue, and once it's set, he paddles his exhausted body back to shore. Now, it's totally up to the wilderness gods. Meanwhile, if there's one team living the good life out here, it's definitely Brooke and Dave. Unlike the other guys roughing it in dirt floor bivvies, they use their insane bushcraft skills to construct an absolute wilderness mansion. The inside is spotless, fully decked out with handmade furniture. To pass the long days whenever they aren't out foraging or fishing, they just hang out in camp, enjoying each other's company. To keep their minds sharp and kill time, Dave gets a wild idea and decides to whittle a checkerboard. He uses his machete to plane a piece of wood flat, then grabs some charcoal from the fire to draw out the black and white grid. For the checkers, he just uses natural resources, sawing a branch into perfectly even little pucks. He rubs charcoal on half of them to make the black pieces. Just like that, a legit handmade wilderness board game is born. The couple plays game after game in their cabin, completely forgetting they're in a hardcore survival situation. Pushing to day 28, Jim and Ted rush down to the water, hoping to pull in a fat crab haul. But when they look out over the bay, the surface is completely empty. The fire extinguisher they used as a buoy is totally gone. A sinking feeling hits them. Jim doesn't waste time. He jumps in the boat and starts paddling circles around the bay looking for it. But no matter how hard he scans, there's no sign of the buoy. Just as he's about to lose it, a seal pops its head out of the water. Jim knows the trap has to be right here and figures that seal probably poached all their crabs. Sure enough, after dragging the area, Jim manages to snag the trap line, but when he tries to haul it up, the trap is insanely heavy. He pulls with everything he's got, but it's snagged. Finally, he pulls too hard and the paracord snaps. The crab pot sinks straight to the bottom of the ocean. Watching from the beach, Ted instantly starts ripping into his brother. "You blew it." "I didn't blow it. You blew it with that buoy." "You blew it. The crab trap is your job." "Yeah, it's my fault." "But sure, no, you just lost it off the kelp. That's what I said." "Okay, I couldn't help it. It wasn't tangled enough." "Well, you could have reached out with your rod. Couldn't grab it. It slipped off the kelp. And then I watched it just sink right to the bottom, dude, like a stone." Watching their ticket to free food literally sink to the bottom of the ocean, Jim is completely crushed. He doesn't understand why they pour so much blood and sweat into this place and just get slapped in the face. In an instant, the starvation and despair wash over him. Defeated, Jim paddles his exhausted body back to the beach. The brothers look absolutely miserable and helpless. They're giving 100% just trying to survive out here, but it feels like the island is actively trying to break them. These constant gut punches are destroying their mental game. That hardcore resolve is starting to crack, replaced by pure anxiety and short tempers. Pushing to day 29, Pete and Sam are actually holding steady. They're playing the long game, making smart, calculated moves. Aside from essential foraging runs, they spend all their time hoarding firewood. Having a massive stockpile of wood means they never lose their fire. It wards off the freezing cold, lets them boil water and cook, and honestly, they're just prepping hardcore for the brutal late game. But every time they leave camp, they have to clamber over this massive, dead log. It's slick with moss, making it a sketchy climb every single time. For an older guy like Pete, it burns unnecessary calories and is a major fall hazard. To make it safer for his dad, Sam decides to bushcraft a set of stairs. He gets right to it. He harvests some thick, solid branches from the timber, bucks them down to size, and carves out some deep notches to lock the wood together, making sure it's load-bearing. Finally, he uses paracord to lash all the joints tight, making it bomb-proof. When it's done, Sam sets the stairs against the log and tests them out. They are rock solid. The sketchy obstacle they've been dealing with is totally neutralized. Over at Brooke and Dave's camp, even though they're living in luxury, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. As the days drag on, Brooke is really starting to feel the crushing isolation of the wild. Turns out being cut off from the world out here will mess with the head of even the most hardcore survivalist. On top of that, Dave's luck is running dry. He's been standing on the rocks for an hour, and his line hasn't moved an inch. Staring out at the dead water, Dave is feeling the slump. While they're both dealing with their own funk, the campfire inside suddenly catches the logs next to the chimney on fire. Thank God Brooke reacts instantly. She kills the flames before they torch the cabin. Staring at the charred logs, Brooke is shaking. If she hadn't caught that flare-up, their entire wilderness mansion would be ashes right now. they'd have nothing left to do but pack up and tap out. This sudden fire scare served as a massive wake-up call for the couple. It reminded them that wilderness survival is a constant threat. Even when you're living comfortably, you can never let your guard down. Pushing to day 30, Sam sits in front of the camera, starting to vent about the brutality of the wild. After all, since the drop he hasn't caught a single fish, he's been entirely carried by his old man. For a competitive guy like Sam, this is a huge blow to his pride. He's quietly bottling up a lot of frustration. After squaring away camp, father and son head out for their daily fishing grind. After picking a solid spot, they get straight to casting. Once again, the old man shows how it's done. Barely 10 minutes in, Pete successfully hauls in a fat 2 or 3 pounder. Watching this from the side, Sam is green with envy. Seeing that his line still isn't getting any action, Sam decides to pivot. He targets the crabs in the shallows instead. He immediately rolls up his sleeves, carefully wades into the water, and starts feeling around the rocks. In the blink of an eye, Sam successfully grabs a crab. Even though it's not a monster, it's finally Sam's first real catch. This small win gives him a much-needed confidence boost. One fish, one crab, paired with some scavenged shellfish. Tonight's dinner is officially secured. Night falls. Father and son sit around the warm fire, tearing into this hard-earned meal. Smiles of pure satisfaction light up their faces. Looking at their current momentum, Pete and Sam are a serious threat. They absolutely have what it takes to go head-to-head with the couple. However, Pete is getting up there in age. Compared to the other two teams, his stamina and endurance are noticeably fading. This is becoming the biggest wild card in their run for the championship, pushing to day 31. The long grind of wilderness survival has taken a visible toll on Brooke. Her face, which used to look so sharp, has lost all of its initial glow. Her eyes are heavy with exhaustion. Dave is in the same boat. His beard is overgrown, and he's dropped a significant amount of weight. But even though they're currently running on empty with no food reserves, their mental game remains rock solid. However, if they don't secure enough calories today, it's going to severely impact their ability to survive out here. They head back to their honey hole on the rocks and start casting. Maybe it's the power of love, or maybe the wilderness gods are just smiling on them. Barely after hitting the water, Dave gets a solid hit on his line. He dials in, focuses, and slowly reels it in. Before long, a fat greenling is hauled onto the rocks. Not to be outdone, Brooke follows right up and hooks a monster of her own, and the hot streak doesn't stop there. In a flash, Brooke also reels in a lingcod. In just 2 hours, they've bagged 3 huge fish. You gotta admit, Brooke and Dave seem like the chosen ones. While the other survivalists are grinding themselves to the bone just for a scrap of food, they're out here effortlessly hauling in fat fish. It's enough to make anyone jealous. Dave guts and cleans the fish right there on the rocks. While processing the lingcod, he notices the meat has a faint light blue tint. The grain is crystal clear. Dave knows exactly what this is. That blue color comes from a bile pigment called biliverdin. Only about 20% of lingcod have this blue meat, making it incredibly dense in nutrients. It's a super rare, high-value catch. Dave is absolutely stoked. Moving to day 32, Ted sits silently in the corner of their shelter, totally bummed out. Jim talks to the camera, daydreaming about a comfortable life, trying to take the edge off his own frustration. But the gnawing reality is, they still have absolutely nothing for dinner tonight. They're clashing hard over their foraging strategy. Jim is dead set that fishing is their only real move. Fish meat is dense, packed with high-quality protein, and provides the fast calorie dump their bodies are screaming for. Ted, on the other hand, wants to play it safe. He argues that harvesting shellfish off the rocks is a guaranteed return. Neither one will back down. Unable to agree, they split up to do their own thing. Jim grabs his rod and heads to the water to fish, while Ted takes his gear to scour the rocks for shellfish. But the results are disappointing. Jim fishes the entire day, and his rod doesn't even twitch. He gets totally skunked. Ted, however, brings in a massive haul. Even though shellfish aren't packed with protein, he gathers enough volume. It all adds up, and it's enough to keep them alive. This routine drags on all the way to day 38. Day in and day out, Ted is grinding on the rocks, foraging for food. He never stops hustling. But Jim, after getting skunked day after day, is completely demoralized. He just lays around camp all day, doing nothing, unwilling to even try looking for food. Seeing himself busting his ass and out here while his brother just chills and eats the food he gathers, the resentment inside Ted is building fast. All that pent-up anger finally boils over. The two brothers explode in their most vicious argument yet. "I think you're too scared." "I'm not scared. I just know that I'm getting all the food foraging." Across the empty wilderness, both are digging in, screaming at each other. Seeing this really makes you worry about how long these brothers can keep surviving out here. Time flies, and we're at day 40. The same 3 teams are still out here, grinding it out. Winter has officially rolled into Vancouver Island. The biting freezing wind strips away the last of the warmth, and with it, the already scarce food resources become even harder to find. But even so, Ted and Jim don't stop hunting for calories. They head down to the shoreline and start flipping rocks, trying to grab any little fish hiding underneath. In a survival situation with literally zero other options, these tiny, insignificant fish are their absolute lifeline. They might be small, but they still provide critical energy. If they can harvest enough of them, they can still somewhat fill their empty stomachs. But while Ted is laser focused on flipping a rock, disaster strikes. The rock slips from his grip and crushes his foot. Agonizing pain rips through his entire body. Seeing him go down, Jim immediately sprints over to help. He carefully rolls the boulder off. Thankfully, after checking him out, Ted's foot isn't busted. The brothers keep grinding straight through until dark and end up bagging a solid sack full of little fish. With these hard earned calories, they aren't just going to feast. They carefully ration every single bite. They know strict rationing is the only way to squeeze out one more day in this starving winter. Moving to day 41, Brooke and Dave have hit a dry spell. They haven't caught a fish in days. This massive lack of protein is completely destroying Brooke's physical condition. She's pale, lethargic, and completely drained, but she can't just lay around. When the tide rolls out, the couple heads back to their spot on the rocks to throw some lines in. But with the temperatures dropping fast, the fish have moved into deeper, warmer water. Even with their top tier angling skills, they freeze on the rocks for 2 hours and catch absolutely nothing. Frustrated and empty handed, they start the defeated hike back to camp. But on the way back, Dave accidentally spots some cordage wrapped in fishing net. Staring at it, a light bulb goes off in Dave's head. He decides to bushcraft a crab trap. If he can pull in a few crabs, he can finally get some solid nutrients into his starving wife. He gets straight to work. He lashes some branches and sticks together to make a frame, then wraps the net tight around it. It's rough, but it's a fully functional crab pot. Dave humps the trap down to the water, baits it with fish heads they saved from earlier catches, and heaves it into the ocean. Watching the trap sink into the dark water, Dave silently prays for a heavy pull tomorrow. Pushing to day 42, the temps have plummeted to 28 degrees. Even with the sun out, there is absolutely zero warmth. Last night in the bivvy, Sam was shivering uncontrollably. He didn't sleep a wink. To upgrade their sleeping situation, father and son decide it's time to winterize their camp. They head into the bush and harvest a massive amount of dry hemlock boughs. They layer them thick on the floor, creating a barrier against the freezing ground and blocking the moisture. After busting out all those chores, Sam is holding up okay because he's young. But 61-year-old Pete is visibly deteriorating. Watching the old man ignore his own exhaustion, still grinding away to reinforce the shelter and chop firewood, Sam's heart aches for him. His dad is already running on a severe calorie deficit. Pushing his body this hard is just torching through his fat reserves and putting his health in serious danger. So father and son hold a quick team meeting. They agree that from here on out, health and safety are the top priorities. Sam takes over all the heavy labor, and Pete is ordered to stay in camp as much as possible, conserving his energy. Meanwhile, brothers Ted and Jim, ever since they got a taste of those tiny rockfish the other day, are completely hooked on the protein. Even with the tide pools icing over, it doesn't stop their relentless hunt for food. They know getting calories into their system is way more important than staying warm right now. But days of freezing temps have turned all the kelp on the beach into frozen popsicles. After scouring the rocks, they come up totally empty. Out of options, the brothers pin all their hopes on the gill net they set a while back, so they brave the freezing wind and hike out to check it. Jim hauls the heavy net out of the frigid water. Surprisingly, they actually snared a small fish, but the excitement dies instantly. Jim takes a whiff and a gnarly, putrid smell hits him hard. It's obvious the meat is totally rotten. Who knows how long it's been since they last checked this net? They both know damn well eating rotten meat out here is a massive risk. But right now, the brothers are desperate. Weeks of starvation have turned them into walking skeletons. Staring at this chunk of protein, the brothers decide to roll the dice. They roast the rotten fish over the fire, cooking it over and over. To kill off as much bacteria as possible, they don't stop until the outside is completely charred and carbonized. Once it's cooked through, Jim tears off a small piece and slowly chews it. Seeing his brother eat it without hesitation, Ted wolfs is down too. Even though the taste is absolutely foul, after eating, they're anxious as hell, praying their bodies don't reject it. But luck isn't on their side. Early the next morning, Ted wakes up with severe stomach cramps. The agonizing pain keeps him up all night. He figures eating that rotten fish yesterday must have triggered his chronic stomach issues. Fortunately, Jim's immune system holds up, and he doesn't show any bad symptoms. Night falls quickly. Seeing his brother writhing in pain, Jim's heart aches for him. He tells Ted to stay in camp and rest, while he heads out into the pitch black alone, fighting the freezing wind to hunt for food. He knows that even though it's freezing at night, crabs and other marine life come out onto the rocks to feed, meaning the foraging is way better than during the day. But right now, Jim is way more worried about his brother's condition than how much food he gathers. If the pain gets worse and Ted can't handle it, they'll be forced to tap out by the medical team. After 3 hours of scouring the rocks, Jim manages to harvest hundreds of limpets. With a solid food reserve, he hopes these calories can keep them in the game for another 4 or 5 days, while praying his brother recovers fast. Pushing to day 44. The spark is completely gone from Pete's face. His eyes are sunken in, his skin is rough and weathered. The deep lines of exhaustion show exactly how much this 40-day wilderness grind has broken him down. Today's mission is still fishing. Since they've been getting skunked, Sam decides to switch up the tactic. He ties on a longer line and casts it out way deeper, hoping to hit a pocket of fish. But severe malnutrition is wrecking Pete's short-term memory. He forgets things seconds after doing them. Sam asks his dad for the fishing line, but Pete insists he already gave it to him and gets mad, accusing Sam of losing it. Fueled by starvation and anxiety, the father and son explode in their first major argument. No, Sam, I pulled off probably 20 yards of 20-pound fishing line. That's right, I have that in my pocket. You were saying 20-gauge wire. I have 20-pound fishing line in my pocket. That's exactly what I'm talking about. God damn. Okay, the 20-pound line, and I just said I have that in my pocket, okay? I didn't hear you say it. Just a second. You said that you were talking about the 20-gauge wire. You know I wasn't. I'm talking about the wire for, look, listen. Talking about the wire for the rock and 20-pound on the end of that, so it'll break away. That's all I was trying to say. Damn it! That's all I was trying to say. Right now, both of them are being completely hijacked by starvation and frustration. They don't even realize how aggressive they're being. The argument echoes through the empty wilderness. Thankfully, they eventually find the line. After cooling off, they get back to the fishing grind. But after 2 hours of freezing on the rocks, they still catch absolutely nothing. Defeated father and son trudge back to camp empty-handed. Moving to day 45. First thing in the morning, Brooke and Dave rush to the beach to check the crab trap they set. Both of them have dropped a massive amount of weight. Even without doing heavy labor, their bodies feel incredibly weak. When Dave hits the shore and pulls the trap up, it feels heavy. He gets a rush of excitement, thinking they scored a huge haul of crabs. But when he pulls it onto the rocks, they both freeze. There isn't a single crab inside. Instead, the trap is completely stuffed with sea snails. They look at each other, stoked but a little nervous. They just have to pray these snails actually taste decent. Dave tosses the trap back into the water. Back at camp, they toss the snails straight onto the hot coals. Once they're fully cooked, Dave uses a twig to pry the meat out and hands it to his wife. Brooke takes a bite and winces at the weird taste, but to survive, they force it down, praying they don't get food poisoning from this random protein. Pushing to day 46. Even sitting right next to the roaring fire, Brooke can't stop shivering. The relentless starvation is acting like a parasite, slowly eating away at her body and her willpower. And right now, the homesickness and missing her kids hits a breaking point. After a month and a half of wilderness survival, Brooke has gone from thriving to freezing, starving, and totally exhausted. Her mindset has completely shifted. The thought of tapping out has completely taken over her mind. Compared to Brooke's despair, Dave is holding up a bit better, but he's just white-knuckling it. Today, he heads down to the beach to check the trap again, hoping for a miracle, but reality hits hard. He pulls it up, and aside from a few snails, there's still zero crabs. Even though Dave knows the snails are edible, that tiny scrap of protein is nowhere near enough to fuel their bodies. Long-term starvation is draining their stamina day by day. In this moment, even the rock-solid Dave gets swallowed by pure despair. Watching his wife's mental health tank and her body waste away, Dave feels completely powerless. He has no idea how to fix this, and he doesn't know how much longer he can hold on. Rolling into day 47, Ted's condition hasn't improved at all. He's incredibly weak, dizzy, and totally drained. So the entire burden of foraging falls on Jim's shoulders. Ted stays back in camp, doing whatever light chores he can handle. Even though the brothers bicker constantly and fight over who's pulling their weight, when things get this critical, they drop the BS. They lean on each other, protect each other. This deep-rooted brotherhood becomes their ultimate lifeline in this brutal environment. Fast forward to day 49. A boat comes screaming across the water, breaking the silence of the wild. Fans are guessing which team finally broke. As the camera gets closer, it's Brooke and Dave who called in the tap-out. Facing the camera, the couple vents. I got nothing left. I just can't go on. Feels like when you've had the flu, you just get your butt kicked and you just feel like, oh, you just got hit by a truck. It kind of feels like that when she's saying, I've had it. I don't feel like getting out of bed. I know, it's for real. She's had it. You're just fighting starvation and fighting starvation. Honestly, you're just waiting for the next team to give up. Turns out, Dave has been watching his wife waste away these last few days, and it's breaking his heart. He knows Brooke has hit her absolute physical limit. Forcing her to stay out here would cause permanent damage to her body. Even though Dave could probably tough it out a bit longer, he refuses to sit by and watch his wife sacrifice her health for a paycheck. So, after a lot of soul-searching, the couple decides to pull the plug. Brooke and Dave, the heavy favorites to win it all, pack their bags, board the evac boat, and sadly end their 49-day alone journey. With Brooke and Dave out, Only Ted and Jim and Pete and Sam remain in the field. Moving to day 50, it's a two-team race, the brothers versus the father and son. Over the last few days, thanks to Jim stepping up and taking care of him, Ted's health is finally bouncing back. While Ted was recovering, Jim basically carried the entire camp on his back and he didn't complain once. In his mind, as long as his brother gets better, all the pain and exhaustion is worth it. Today, Jim hits the shoreline on his usual foraging run. The second he flips a rock, he sees a massive school of tiny fish scattering everywhere. He is absolutely hyped. He goes into full predator mode and ends up bagging 24 rockfish. Looking at this massive haul, Jim is ecstatic. Back at camp, he cleans the fish, fires up the stove, and cooks up this epic wild feast. Tonight, the brothers are finally eating good. Time flies, and we're at day 65. After over 2 months of getting battered by the wild, Pete's mental state is hanging by a thread, and his body is incredibly weak. But the grind doesn't stop. Father and son hit the rocks to fish. Miraculously, barely after casting, they hook a fat 2 or 3 pounder. They rush back to camp to cook up this hard-earned meal. But one fish is barely a snack for two starving men. After eating, they just lay in their shelter, hoping to sleep off the hunger pains. Day 66. Today is Christmas. Stuck out in the wilderness, Ted and Jim can only look into the camera and wish their families back home a Merry Christmas. But the holiday doesn't make their lives any easier out here. If anything, the starvation and homesickness feel like two massive boulders crushing their chests, making it even harder to endure. Right now, the brothers are just praying the other team taps out so they can finally go home. Time flies. Fast forward to day 70. The brothers have survived a few more days of pure starvation. Ted's beard is out of control, his hair is a mess, and he looks incredibly haggard. Jim is still handling the firewood chores, but severe malnutrition has made him incredibly weak. Everything is a struggle. Since drop-off, Jim has lost a whopping 58 pounds. Lately, the thought of tapping out has been echoing in his head nonstop. What are we doing out here? Like maybe some starving, just freezing, like just so bored of it. Can't take being so hungry. Just day after day eating this is not making me feel any better. So part of me is just like, we should just quit, go back. Seeing his brother mentally breaking, Ted immediately steps in to get his head right. We're hoping that no one's going to beat us, Jim. Crawl, it's so much easier, said. No one can suffer like we can. Are you giving up hope, Jim? At this point in the challenge, it's no longer about who can forage the most food. It's a pure mental game, a battle of grit and endurance. Whoever can push past their physical limits takes home the win. Pushing to day 71, long-term starvation finally catches up to Pete. His acid reflux is out of control. The constant dry heaving and severe heartburn are putting him in pure agony. With zero meds out here, all Sam can do is boil water to try and soothe his dad's stomach. Watching his old man suffer breaks Sam's heart. He knows his dad has hit an absolute physical wall and just can't take this beating anymore. But they are inches away from that 500K. Tapping out now means all this suffering and grinding was for nothing. Thinking about that is tearing Sam apart. Meanwhile, Jim and Ted are in the same sinking boat. With 0 calories coming in, Ted's stomach ulcers flare up again. The blinding pain leaves him pale and shivering. They think back to drop-off when they were full of confidence. They honestly thought with their combined experience, getting food would be a breeze. But reality slapped them in the face. Instead of thriving, it's been a long, miserable journey of starving and freezing. During this run, they burned massive calories building a boat, wove crab pots by hand, and tried every foraging trick in the book. But no matter how hard they hustled, almost all of it was a dead end. Sure, they bumped heads and got into screaming matches. But when their backs were against the wall, they dropped the BS, leaned on each other, and survived night after night of freezing starvation. Relying on that deep brotherhood and pure grit, these heavy underdogs clawed their way right through the brush and into the finals. Just when the finish line is in sight, Ted's body is failing. Seeing his brother writhing in pain, tears Jim up inside. Day 72, Pete and Sam are finally hitting their breaking point. The endless starvation leaves them feeling completely powerless. To make matters worse, the frostnip on Pete's toes is getting nasty. Looking back to drop-off, Pete was hyped, hoping to use his veteran bushcraft skills to carry his son to the win. They crushed it early on, living off Pete's fishing. They barely went hungry. But winter changed everything. The temps tanked and the calories dried up. They've been running on fumes, pushing the limit every day. The cold and starvation are literally draining Pete's life and willpower away. His body is completely done. Left with no choice, Pete has a heart-to-heart with his boy. Real. I don't have any more fat to lose. And the way we're feeling right now and the way we're struggling, I just can't believe there's someone else still out here. It would be nice to win this, but there are other things more important. We still have the rest of our lives to go. Sam listens quietly, fighting back tears. Guilt washes over him. He knows the finish line is right there, but no amount of money is worth his dad's health. Rolling into day 74, an evac boat cuts through the water, breaking the silence of the bay. Just as expected, Pete and Sam called in the tap out. Facing the camera, Pete reflects, it's been a hell of an adventure. Once in a lifetime thing, but, like all good things, this has got to come to an end, right? Basically, we just don't have any fat left on our bodies. We drink water, it goes right through us. It's just a constant battle with dehydration. Yeah, we're at our physical limit. Sam hates to walk away, but looking at his dad's failing body, he knows they can't risk it. It's a tough pill to swallow for this team. If Pete was just 10 years younger, with their grit and teamwork, this duo might have easily taken the crown. Father and son pack their gear, load into the evac chopper, and officially end their epic 74-day survival run. Day 75. With Pete and Sam out, Ted and Jim are the last team standing. But they have absolutely no idea they just won. Early morning, the crew radios in for a routine med check. Trying to get some calories in before the medics arrive, they hit the beach to forage. Soon, the crew's boat pulls into the bay. The first thing the team does is give the brothers a full top-to-bottom medical eval. After the check is done, they sit down for an interview. Being out here is just kind of like a horrific feeling of torture. And just getting through the day, walking around, you feel like you just finished a marathon. And then you're so starving, even after you eat, you still feel weak. But at least that makes you feel better. But you got to chop wood. You got to light a fire. Little do they know, while they're totally dialed into the interview, their girlfriends are sneaking up right behind them. I'm actually amazed with how far I can really, hearing that familiar voice, they whip around. Seeing those faces they miss so much, the brothers lose it. They pull their girls into a massive hug, crying. Over 70 days of pure suffering and homesickness all pours out at once. The brothers pack up their camp, load into the chopper with their girls, and finally head home. And with that, season 4 of Alone comes to an epic close. After catching their breath, the brothers show off today's haul. It's another Ziploc bag full of tiny rockfish. It might look pretty nasty, but those little fish literally kept them in the fight. These two were written off as complete underdogs with zero chance. But running on pure grit and unbreakable brotherhood, they weathered the storm. They pulled off the ultimate upset. It just goes to show real wilderness survival isn't just about physical endurance or bushcraft skills, it's the ultimate test of human willpower and the mind. Finally, the two brothers packed up their gear, boarded the show's helicopter with their family, and began the journey back home. And with that, Alone Season 4 came to a perfect end.